All right, we are ready to talk more college football and NFL here on Prime Sports Network with Marc Lawrence of PlaybookSports.com and the Playbook Experts YouTube channel. How's it going, Mark? Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, Greg. I hope you ate as much pumpkin pie and whipped cream as I did yesterday, but if not, you're probably better off for it.
Yeah, it's the thanks can go in a variety of different ways, but food is near the top of the list, no
Yes,
question about
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
And football is also near the top of the list. NFL games, 3 games yesterday. And then, of course, college football. We had 1 game yesterday and several games that I was able to get caught up with since we've kind of postponed recording this show for a few hours. So I was able to catch up on that big game between Tulane and Cincinnati. That's really the biggest game of the whole day. And is look, we talked about it before with these types of teams that don't normally get this chance. And Willie Fritz has done a fantastic job with Tulane. And to see that it looked like they had screwed their opportunity at home a few weeks ago against Central Florida, and to have another chance to do it today, and they got it done, that was really nice to see.
Really nice to see because, they were the premier team of all the group of five teams, at least from when the initial
That's right.
football poll rankings came out. The first 2 weeks they were there. They were the only team and slipped out. It's nice to see them take care of business today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Willie Fritz does down the road here.
Yeah, it looks like good opportunity. Maybe we'll see Tulane if they can win the AAC championship. They could be in that New Year's Six bowl game. So that would be another nice little story. All right, so you had the Egg Bowl yesterday, but nothing really going on there, and another loss for Ole Miss. So they just slide down the season, and everybody's talking about Lane Kiffin headed to Auburn. So I think if Lane Kiffin goes to Auburn, I get the feeling we're going to find out probably this weekend. I think if we don't hear anything this weekend, well, let's just put it this way. I think Auburn's going to hire a coach this weekend. I just don't know if it's Lane Kiffin or not, even though it does seem like that's a possibility, a strong possibility.
Well, it would certainly stir the pot, if you would, in that Alabama Auburn Iron Bowl rivalry.
Better wait for that game to be over first before you make any announcements.
Well, I'm sure they'll do just that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But when and if it happens, and it probably will, what a nice little matchup between Saban and his former assistant in Lane Kiffin, to whom neither one really digs each other. So that would really, say, widen the gap, I guess, if there can be any wider between the fans of Alabama and Auburn.
How about if Auburn pulls up the upset and you've got a coach, Cadillac Williams, that everybody loves at Auburn? I don't know. I mean, do you think it's possible that they're like thinking, all right, we haven't given Kiffin the job yet. If he wins this game, maybe we give it to Cadillac, but we're probably not going to win this game, so we're this close to signing Kiffin.
Well, I think they look long term more so than
Sure.
short term right here, right now. And if Cadillac does happen to pull the rug out on the Tide this Saturday, maybe the edict will be that Lane, put your name on, sign this contract here, and make sure we put a little revision here that Cadillac Williams will be on your coaching staff.
That's true. That
Right.
could that might very well be something. And you know what? If Lane Kiffin was smart, he wouldn't even need to do that.
No, he wouldn't. Right.
Do it himself.
Right.
But we'll see. First things first, and that's the football games coming up this weekend. And we look at the championship scenario, and we can kind of start with what happened last week, and that was Tennessee going down to South Carolina. I mean, South Carolina picked like the for the SEC's sake, the worst time to put everything together offensively. But for South Carolina's sake, the best time, because I think a lot of fans have been waiting for South Carolina to play that well offensively with Rattler and so forth, and they just put it all together in the right game. But Tennessee not only loses the game, they lose the quarterback. That's a really sad story. Boy, how things just changed so fast for Tennessee, and it's just opened up the door immensely. I mean, we have I don't recall ever seeing this many potential scenarios for the Final Four since they've adopted it.
And had Tennessee won, it still would have magnified that because they would be in the running as well. But they're out. A couple other teams can make their cases here. We got Michigan playing Ohio State this weekend. We'll talk about that. Southern Cal sort of in the driver's seat right now if they can win that Pac-12 championship. So there's a lot of things that can happen inside the college football playoff between now and then. And I'm sure between now and then there'll be an upset or two along the way.
Well, futures-wise, of course, Georgia's the heavy favorite. Ohio State not too far back, about 2-1. Michigan still at 10-1, which is not a bad deal. And then you have TCU 18, Clemson, USC are about 25, LSU 35, and Oregon is still in there. I look at that and I really still believe now with Tennessee out of the picture that I'd go with LSU if I'm looking if I'm trying to make some money off the deal. Maybe, and I can see why people might say, yeah, but TCU, they're going to have to play a team like Georgia to get in. But I just don't see TCU winning the national championship. So because of that, I look at LSU, and I know they got those types of players, and I know that type of coach. So, and the scenario that I'd be looking at to put money on LSU to win the championship is beat Georgia and hope you don't get matched up with Georgia in the playoffs. Hope that Georgia and LSU are different seeds in that first round, and hope that somebody knocks Georgia off. So you don't have to beat them twice in a span of a month, which, as we saw last year, is just not very easy. It's not something that I know Alabama had a lot of injuries, but it's just not an easy way to go about trying to do things, especially how good Georgia is. So, and I don't think that's a crazy scenario when you're talking about a team's number at 35-1. We're not talking 10-1 here. 35-1. I think that most people, if you're a futures bettor, should have some common sense to say, okay, I throw a few bucks on LSU.
Well, LSU's not going to hook Georgia in the college football playoff, if for no other reason that if they do beat Georgia, LSU will come in as the number 4 seed, and they would have to play the number 1 seed, who would not be Georgia in that case. Georgia would fall to 2 or 3, and I couldn't see them falling much further than 3, being a one-loss team, leading the pack most of the way this football season.
Because then the Big Ten team would be the 1 seed.
The winner of the Ohio State-Michigan would be the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
All right. So you tell me, between TCU, Michigan, Clemson, and LSU, which team would you put money on?
To win the national championship?
Yep. Based on those numbers, which one is the best value for you?
Well, no Clemson for me. I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs. I really don't. I know they're a one-loss team and a lot of pedigree and all that good stuff, but I don't think they're in favor of the committee here. They haven't really showed that all year long. I wouldn't do it with LSU being a 2-loss team. I think they're going to catch the bad draw, basically because of being a 2-loss team. So I'll say this, that if Michigan takes Ohio State out, that's who I would back, okay? Because if they take them out, they're going to do it because of their defense, which is superlative. 8 teams this year, they've held a season low or second low yards. That's not a fluke. That's pretty good, but it depends upon what happens this Saturday, whether or not Blake Corum plays and how Michigan plays against Ohio State. But Michigan would be my answer to that question.
And again, they're 10-1. By the way, the Heisman, now Caleb Williams, because he had a big game against that stellar UCLA defense, has become kind of like the co-favorite with C.J. Stroud. Now, and I could buy that a little bit more. I think Williams is actually, based on where USC is compared to Ohio State, I think Caleb's maybe elevated his team more. So I could see that. But, Corum's 18-1, and our boy Duggan is still at 40-1 to win the Heisman. So here's the deal. I mean, if Corum plays against Ohio State, he's going to have his moment. He's going to have the type of moment you dream of when you're trying to win the Heisman. Because if Michigan beats Ohio State, Corum plays and has a big game, and he's a big reason why. First of all, he takes C.J. Stroud out, and now he's the third choice right now. So if you beat Ohio State, have the big game, you've knocked Stroud out, you move up to the number 2. If Caleb Williams, all they have to do is lose a game. They lose a game, he's out. So at 18-1, and 40-1 with Duggan, because Duggan can still have a big game in the Big 12 championship, maybe do something that everybody's watching, and he saves the day again. And now they're seeing what we've been talking about all season. So those are two guys I would definitely put a few bucks on just in case.
Well, I'd like the rationale there specifically because if it ends up being a Cinderella season for TCU, they win out, they win the national championship. You know Duggan has got to be there, and or if Michigan goes undefeated and wins the national championship, so too does the running back. So
Yep.
I think you take either one of those two. You take your chances on a team that's currently undefeated that has a legitimate chance to go undefeated and roll the dice with two nice long shot plays there. And I think they're both solid plays.
All right, let's get into it. Let's talk SEC football first of all. And again, the Egg Bowl was yesterday. There's a game going on today, and it's an important game for Missouri. They need the game for bowl eligibility, and I actually like them today. I put a few bucks on them. And I think that's a big reason, and we're going to find out that that's going to be a major reason to handicap to go with some of these games over the next 24 hours, because you're going to have a lot of scenarios where one team needs the game, another team doesn't, and I like those scenarios, especially because, Mark, and you know this as a handicapper, no matter what sport you handicap, the hardest thing in the world to figure out is whether a team is going to bring their A game, is whether their team is focused to play. Are they up for the game? Especially like in sports like basketball or hockey and baseball when they play all those games. But still, you don't know whether teams are up for it. But when you have a situation where a team needs the game for bowl eligibility, that kind of scenario, like it's do or die, and you know the other team is playing for nothing, it doesn't guarantee success, but at least it gives you a peace of mind knowing, hey, at least I have the team that really wants it versus the team that couldn't care less.
Yeah, it puts you in a favorable position, is what it does. And we had outlined in our playbook newsletter this week, there are a total of 16 teams that are 5-6 going into this weekend that need a win to become bowl eligible. And the way I would attack those teams, you can find the list of those teams in the newsletter. The way I would attack those teams would be like this. I would look to play these teams against teams like you mentioned that already have a bowl bid in their back pocket. And I would also play those against teams that just clinched that bowl bid in their back pocket. Of those 16 teams, only one fits the last criteria, where the team they're playing just clinched the bowl bid, and the team they're playing is playing for the bowl, and that was the aforementioned game you just said, Missouri playing Arkansas.
All right, so there you go. And I do like what's going on with the program. Drinkwitz really has turned this team around. I know you're not seeing the win-loss, and that's important, but he's had back-to-back excellent recruiting cycles, which is huge for Missouri. They're a young team this season, so they're learning as they're playing. And this would really tip it off that they can get a bowl and get the extra practices and so forth. So keep an eye on Missouri, the future of the program. By the way, and we're not going to get into anything else regarding the games today because we're recording it today, and most of these games, with the exception of maybe the Florida State game, will already be underway by the time any of our viewers are watching this. And speaking of that game tonight, Florida State, I like Florida State in the game. I think this is a perfect opportunity for them to give it back to the Gators, Mark. They've lost 3 straight to Florida. They got the injury situations to Florida's wide receivers. Like all their guys, key guys are out. And Florida State's on a tremendous hot streak right now, winning 4 straight up and against the spread by a 173-39 margin.
Yeah, they're playing as good a ball right now as they have all year. And the other side is playing probably as poorly as they have all year. So it's difficult to make that case for a Florida Gator team. You could talk about pedigree, history in the past, and all that stuff, but the fact of the matter is it's like a horse race. Do you want a horse going into the race that's really not hitting on all cylinders, isn't in complete form? Just because he's shown before in the past he can win a race like this? No, you want a horse that shows he can win a race like this, and that would be Florida State.
Tomorrow, Georgia takes on Georgia Tech. Unfortunately for Georgia Tech, they need a win for bowl eligibility. So, they might want to rethink this matchup having to play Georgia at the end of the season every year. Georgia's beaten Georgia Tech by a 180-35 margin over the last 4 seasons.
Well, let me say this about that game, Greg, before we skip past this, because a lot of people are going to skip right past that game. I'm in a contest in Las Vegas. It's called the Circa Invitational. 16 people were invited to participate in it, and I'm one of them. And I'm still alive for the prize. But anyway, you have to put 5 plays in every week. Georgia Tech was one of my plays.
36?
At plus 35.5.
35.5.
Right? Yeah, and what I'm doing here basically is, number one, they're on that, what I call that shaky 16 list, those 16 teams that need that win to become bowl eligible. Number two, Georgia is right now a little bit of a noose because they need the win to stay number one in the college football playoff rankings. They've got the much bigger game up next in the Southeast Conference Championship game. But the beauty in this game is the fact that Georgia Tech, since they fired Jeff Collins, they were 1-3 when they fired him. They're 4-3 since he's been gone. And if you take a look at this football program, they have beat 2 teams straight up as 20-point dogs this year.
Yeah.
20-point dogs. Okay?
Yeah.
Most recently, their last game. So
and they were down 17-0 last week.
Exactly.
They didn't give up a point after that.
Yeah, they didn't blink.
That was weird.
Yes,
that was that's college football for you.
So the stat that comes to that particular situation is if you beat a team as a 20-point dog and you come back as a 20-point road dog the next game, it's happened 15 times. They've gone 11-4 against the spread, which means the favorite generally will play down to their level. So cross your fingers for Georgia Tech for me in this contest this week.
You got it.
Okay.
35.5.
There we go.
Hopefully they'll lose by 35 or less.
There we go.
35 is nice.
Yes.
All right. Now, sticking in the SEC, and there's SEC ACC matchups at this time of year, at this particular Saturday. Here's another one. And you know what? This is actually going to be one of my double-digit upset plays, and that is South Carolina against Clemson. We just talked about Clemson with the futures. They're a 14-point favorite against South Carolina. It's 450 on the money line. And everything, history, and even a few trends say you should be taking Clemson. The Playbook magazine has a trend of Clemson covering 15 straight times when they take on an opponent with a win percentage of less than 666 following an upset win, and 1-0 this year in that same scenario. And they've won 7 straight versus South Carolina, including the last 5 by a 214-55 margin. I completely understand, but I just think, as I said before, I think South Carolina's at their level of confidence right now is at an all-time high, and they are an SEC football team. And I think that, it's a rivalry. And maybe they're going to go out there and follow up what they had last week and give Clemson a football game. Again,
in the Playbook newsletter this week, we did just a fantastic job on the write-ups this week. My crew did an unbelievable job. I didn't really get a chance to read it all because I was gone for most of the week, came back and thoroughly enjoyed the write-ups. And in the write-up in the Clemson game was called out the fact that if you take a look at Clemson's body of work this year, in the FBS games that they played this year, they've won those games by an average score of 28-24.
Oh.
They're not salting anybody away this year, hardly at all. And that's why they're not in the NCAA playoff committee does not want to wrap their arms around this football team because I think they see right through them. They're just not a top quality football team that would represent the playoff, and they're not the caliber of a program that Clemson's been before in the past. So I'm with you. I think South Carolina's got this sneaky chance because it's a hated rivalry to begin with.
Yep.
To go in there and pull the rug out on an overrated Clemson football team.
Okay. The Louisville-Kentucky rivalry is a little bit more intense on the hardwood. But I kind of like Louisville in this matchup because they are playing their best football of the year. They've won 5 out of 6 straight up ATS. Scott Satterfield has saved his job for now. And I think this win would seal it. I got nothing to worry about. I still don't think he does, but I think this just definitely puts a seal on it because they've lost 3 straight to Kentucky by a 153-44 margin. So you can look at that as one of the rivals definitely feeling like, okay, even though both teams are not playing for anything, they're both going bowling. we can kind of go head to head in a nice little rivalry matchup. And I still don't really like the way Kentucky's played this year, especially offensively.
Well, they haven't played well at all. In fact, I was a little bit surprised that they signed Mark Stoops to that big contract extension. They bought into that early, and you got like $1.5 million raise. The thing I don't like about the Louisville side of the game is that Kentucky is closing the season out with 3 straight home games. They've lost their previous 2 games straight up. And you usually won't find a bowl team that will go out into a bowl game on the heels of 3 successive home losses in a row. Be kind of rather rare to do just that. But if that situation weren't involved in this game here, I would be making the case for Louisville with you as well. So I only put that up as a cautionary stop sign. I'm not going to play the game, but that's the only thing that keeps me out of Louisville.
All right, let's talk about the big rivalry, Auburn, Alabama, 3:30. Bama's a 22-point favorite. You know, I took Auburn last year as one of my double-digit upsets, and they led 10-0, as we remember, in the fourth quarter. And I was like, yeah, man, I think I might be able to get this done. Nope. It was such an infuriatingly, it was especially in the manner in which they weren't able to put them away. It's like they had 4 opportunities to put them away, and every time they couldn't do it. And they allowed Bryce Young just pulled it off, did a great job to get him into overtime with that drive, and then they win it, in overtime. But you know what? I think this Auburn team might just be the way that they're playing now, just as good as last year's team, because last year's team wasn't any good. That's why they were a heavy dog. This year's Alabama's team ain't no good compared to last year's Alabama team. The only thing that I'm worried about is the venue. Saban 8-1 at home against Auburn. Auburn hasn't won at Alabama since 2010. That's the thing I'm more concerned with. But since Cadillac's taken over, they're 2-1 straight up, 3-0 against the spread. Their only loss was in overtime. I love the point spread, but I figured why not 10-1 in a rivalry matchup. I'm definitely sprinkling a couple of bucks on that as well.
I 100% agree. Anything can happen in the Iron Bowl, as we've seen before in the past. Even when the favorites come in looking almost invincible, they leave with that loss, that what happened loss. In Auburn, you got one of those shaky 16 teams that's sitting at 5-6 in the year. They're going to come with everything they've got to secure a bowl bid in this football game. Maybe even, as we talked about earlier, to keep Cadillac Williams on the program on the sidelines with this team. Alabama, you look at them, the last 7 times that they've been conference favorites, double-digit conference favorites, of 16 or more points, they're 0-7 against the spread.
Oh.
Yep. I think this is a nice spot for Auburn to slip in here and take this game right down to the wire. And if they do just that, you've got a good chance, I think, to cash that money line ticket.
All right. LSU, Texas A&M. This is the big one. I don't think anybody has any idea how Texas A&M is going to respond. I kind of get the feeling that they'll go early, and then it all depends what kind of game it is by halftime. I think if LSU plays a good first half and they have even if it's 10-0 or 13-3, I think it's going to end up as a blowout in the second half. But if A&M gets off to a good start and to keep the fans interested, then LSU can be in big trouble because it looks like they're getting 2 key players back, the running back, the receiver. They've been out the last couple of weeks. That's huge for Texas A&M. They are still playing with their true freshman quarterback, so keep that in mind. But this is an A&M team 1-6 straight up and against the spread their last 7 games. The only team they beat was UMass in that stretch.
Nice.
LSU has won 5 straight, including the win over Alabama, covering 4-5, and they've beaten A&M 8 out of 10 all time as SEC foes, and they've covered all 10. So this would be a bad time not to cover this rivalry because, again, as long as LSU wins this game, they put themselves in position in a 1-game, you're in the playoffs kind of deal with Georgia. Look, I liked LSU last week against Alabama. Same reason why I'm going with them again this week. I just think they're moving ahead, and I just think Texas A&M is so fragile right now that it's just going to take one little thing to go wrong in the game on Saturday night, and I think LSU will exploit that.
Well, that one little thing will happen, I can assure you. 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things, okay? Most disappointing coach, hands down this year, Jimbo Fisher. Most disappointing program, hands down this year, Texas A&M. I don't know if you got a chance to see on Twitter last week, but they showed a little video of the game they played at home. They announced a crowd of 70,000 people there. In the second half of the game, when they were getting blasted at the half, in the second half of the game, they panned the crowd. Greg, you and I could have together tallied up how many people were in the stands.
That's embarrassing.
Totally embarrassing. Second half of that football game, there might have been 300 people in that whole stadium. You with me?
And that's a fan base. If you watch Texas A&M play every season, no matter how bad or good they are, you can turn the game on in the fourth quarter. They could be down by 30, and that crowd will be all like into it, like you think that the game was like a 3-point game.
Yes.
And for them to show that's a message. No question.
That's a message that the 12th man is no longer there.
Yes.
The 12th man even left, okay.
And that's a big contract.
Yes.
Big contract. That's got to scare off a lot of ADs about giving those contracts away to coaches.
I would say so for sure.
Yeah. Tennessee Vanderbilt. That's the last one in the SEC to talk about. And look, Hooker's out, Joe Milton's in. And I've really had a fun time with Joe Milton as an ex-Michigan quarterback because he's like one of those quarterbacks with the golden arm that has got no accuracy, nothing up here. It's just that's all it is. It's all arm. Now he's had some good relief appearances this season. He's grown up. He's a different guy. All right, fine, whatever. Maybe he will. We'll see on Saturday night. But I just figure, okay, whatever. Maybe he does it. But I'm willing to bet that he won't. And I'm willing to go ahead and take that 4-1 money line, considering Vanderbilt has beaten Florida. And they went and beat, who'd they beat the week before that? It was Kentucky. So they beat Kentucky and Florida back-to-back weeks. And they have a chance. Now, last week, with Tennessee riding high, you would have thought, well, it's party's over. Tennessee's going to come in here and they're just going to win, and you get no chance for a bowl. 1 week later, not only does Tennessee lose and they're completely down on themselves, but the quarterback's out. That's why you don't ever give up, because you can look at the schedule and say, we don't have a chance, but don't give up, because situations sometimes will go your way. Vanderbilt couldn't have asked for a better opportunity for them to go to a bowl. It would be a tremendous story if they can do it. I'm going to roll the dice that they're going to get it done. But it does all depend on Joe Milton and whether or not he's a different player. And because he's going to be the one guy probably on the field that's going to be like, yeah, let's go, man. Because everybody else is kind of like, our season's over. But he's going to want to show everybody that he's a changed man. I think Tennessee wins or loses with Milton.
Well, I think they could lose with Milton here, too, as well. This Vanderbilt football team, they're another one of those shaky 16 teams, 5-6, playing to get into a bowl against a rival. This is rivalry week, and this is really, truly the rivalry week of football games. The classic rivalries are all playing. And you always look to make a case for an underdog playing with revenge that has some need. There's some big need for Vanderbilt here. And you can just see the bottom just spiraling away from this Tennessee football program here right now. If I were you, I'd put them on your money line list this week as well.
I have. And
yes.
Look at here. This rivalry, the last 10 games have been split 5-5. So it's not like you have a situation where one team hasn't won in 10 years. So Vandy's actually split 5-5, 8-2 against the spread the last 10 years against Tennessee. And Tennessee is 1-8 against the spread on the road versus losing teams. And they're 0-11 against the spread versus a conference opponent off back-to-back straight-up ATS wins. A lot saying to go at least with the points, 14, but why not take a chance on the 4-1 money line?
I agree 100%. I think it's a great spot, and I've been in that venue before, and I've been in both venues because they're only like an hour and a half from each other. It was one of my best college football weekends ever, doing a day-night doubleheader at Vanderbilt in Tennessee. I love that, and I think you're going to see a crowd that's finally into.
They better be.
Into a Vanderbilt-Tennessee football game.
Yes.
Exactly right. Exactly.
All right, Big Ten, and a game going on as we're recording. It's a huge game in the Big Ten West between Iowa and Nebraska. The Huskers have lost 5 straight. The interim coach, we know he's not going to be there. A lot of people saying that Matt Rule seems to be the leading candidate to be the next head coach at Nebraska. I will say that when there is an announcement, we will bring in our Nebraska analyst, Steve Marek, who's done a great job talking Nebraska football on this channel. So we'll bring him in as soon as we either know or if there's a holdup and we need to talk about other potential candidates. But Rule seems to be the one that everyone's talking about. Iowa's on a roll. They've won 4 straight up ATS. If you look at the way they won last week, it's just typical Iowa football. I mean, Ibrahim is just running from like the 5-yard line up and down. I mean, they're just handing the ball off to him on like every play. They get down from the 5 all the way down to like the 20, and it's all Ibrahim. And it's like maybe they should have thought of like giving him a break or two, because predictably, because they're giving him the ball so much on the drive, he gets smacked by an Iowa defender, fumbles the football, Iowa recovers, and then we get the Iowa pick 6 to win the football game. That is Iowa football. Now they control their own destiny. So if they beat Nebraska, which most people believe they will. And by the way, the tight end, their top receiver, is not playing today. So there's a little glitch maybe there. But Iowa's beaten Nebraska 7 straight times. And if they do somehow wind up losing, then that opens the door potentially for Purdue or Illinois. They can still get in, but obviously, if they win, which most people believe they will, then Iowa will play the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan matchup next week.
I think this is a grand spot for Nebraska in this football game here. We've been picking on Iowa all year long for a lot of the right reasons, and the biggest reason for liking Nebraska in this game is simply put, that in the last game of a season when a football team plays their final game in their favorite and they don't average 100 rushing yards a game, they choke like the Heimlich maneuver drills. Okay. You cannot not be able to run the football and lay points in a football game. Now it's the last game of the season. They're expected to do this, where they've got a lot on the line here. They're going to choke on this turkey bone. Believe me, they've got this big game up on deck next to make it to the Big Ten championship game. What a farce that is, but they will if they win this game. And I think Nebraska comes in here footloose and fancy-free. I got to like the Cornhuskers in this game.
Wow, surprised about that, but I hope you're right. And if that happens, you take a look and you have Purdue at Indiana, and Purdue, if Iowa loses, can win the division by beating Indiana. So if Iowa does lose today, then tomorrow Purdue wins, they're in. But if Purdue loses, then Illinois would be able to win the division by beating Northwestern. But that's the only hope for Illinois. First, you have to have the big upset today, and then you have to have Purdue, which those 2 games are going on at the same time. But no question, Indiana is at this point in time coming off the upset win last week against Michigan State in a much better position of pulling off the upset against Purdue than Northwestern over to Illinois. So, and again, Iowa can still get in if Purdue and Illinois lose. I don't see that scenario happening. But yeah, I think Indiana, that could be interesting because Purdue 0-4 against the spread is a favorite this year.
Well, we talked about Jeff Brom, that role, good dog, bad favorite. He's living up to it this year. And, hey, stranger things have happened. We talk about the Nebraska the Northwestern football team, and how, do you realize that they're winless against FBS teams since last year?
Not good.
No, not good at all. Not a. I don't say that he's going out, Fitzgerald.
No, I can't believe that.
No, I can't believe that he would either. But it's really not a pretty picture to paint, and I guess all it is an argument that could be had, maybe to send him out that way. But I got to say this. I got to read this to you too. I just got caught up in the newsletter, and this is how we captured it. We titled the end of it, "We want the merchandise rights to Northwestern football," because they're going to write a book called Northwestern Football, Winless in the USA Since 2021.
Oh,
their only win was in Ireland. Remember?
In Ireland, yeah. I remember when the season began, we all thought, Nebraska, they could get off to a really good start, change Scott Frost's trajectory. And then they laid an egg, and we were like, "Wow, does Pat Fitzgerald have one of those teams again that nobody's thinking they're gonna surprise everybody?" And no, didn't work out that way for both teams. All right, now the big one: Michigan, Ohio State. Buckeyes 7.5-point favorite. Ohio State is 14-1 against the spread with revenge, taking on winning teams. They're in a revenge spot. This is all about the injury situation because Michigan has several key injuries. Ohio State's got their receiver injured, but Harrison's also a blue chip player, so it's not going to affect the outcome for Ohio State. But we all know Corum has to play, and he also has to be effective. Edwards is also injured, but they could do without Edwards. They need Corum. And then you throw in the fact that the tight end's been out. He's supposed to be back. I had the interview, which is available on the channel with Aaron McMahon just a couple of days ago. So if you want to find out more about the injuries and about the Michigan-Ohio State game, you can check out that interview I did. I think this is going to be a tough football game. I don't think this is going to be very easy because it's not like Ohio State has looked like a juggernaut. Like, I don't think they look, even though their defense is better than it was last year, there's still just something I don't know about Ohio State. There's something, it's sort of like the same thing with Michigan. I think both teams are fallible, but Ohio State's got a good offense, Michigan's got a good defense, and I think we'll see a good football game.
I think we will see a good football game here. I don't think it's going to live up to the hype that it was supposed to, and a lot of that is because of what you said. Ohio State has got chinks in their armor, and it's come here in the last month or so. They've been out-yarded in 2 of their last 3 football games. That's not something that you talk about undefeated, best number 1 ranked teams doing just that.
Nope.
But the problem here is that both of these teams were camped at home in the month of September, took on cupcakes, more so Michigan, obviously. And I think it ends up hurting him down the stretch coming into situations like this. My biggest concern in this game is how Jim Harbaugh just chokes like a dog when he is a dog against undefeated teams. He's been in that role 12 times in his career. He's only won 1 of those games.
When was that?
Was it?
When was that?
That 1 win? That was probably the most recent, right?
Yes, it was last year.
Yes, it was. Okay.
Yes.
No, Ohio State was not undefeated, though. Okay.
They weren't?
No, they weren't.
Who did they lose to last year? They lost the Oregon game.
Yeah, they had a loss in that Oregon game, right. So he's 1-11 straight up and 2-10 against the spread, taking points against unbeaten teams. It's kind of like he sits on the sideline and pees his pants, and he's looking for a new pair of Depends. I don't know if that's going to help him in a game like this, with the Buckeyes having that nasty revenge chip on their shoulder here. I think it's a real tough game, Greg, because you can make cases for both sides, and it all comes down to whether or not Blake Corum plays in this football game.
Yeah, but the other thing, too, and even if Corum plays, is at some point, J.J. McCarthy has got to show that they can throw the football effectively, which we have not seen all season.
Right.
Not talking to his tight end or 10-yard out. Talking about down the field, 20, 30, 40, 50-yard kind of chunk plays. Doesn't have to be 10 of them, but show us 2 or 3. And if you can do that with Corum running the football, that I think can win the football game, but we haven't seen that this year. So I can't predict that. That's why I favor Ohio State to win the game. I'll take the points, but I do favor Ohio State to win the football game.
I think they win the game as well.
The only game I want to talk about in the ACC, besides the games we talked about with the SEC matchups, is Pitt-Miami, because this is one of my top picks. I'm all over Pitt. Again, I said it last week when I jumped on Clemson over Miami, because after Miami made their 1 cover, that went away quickly, and I'm still going to go against them here because they're 1-9 against the spread on the season. They got their true freshman quarterback playing. Pitt, meanwhile, 2-0, straight up ATS, is a road favorite this year by 71-20. 12-2 straight up and against the spread as a true road favorite in the 8-year coaching history of Pat Narduzzi at Pitt. So when Pittsburgh is on the road as a road favorite under Pat Narduzzi, they usually take care of business, winning and covering. And I think this is also a situation where you have Pitt's lost 4 years in a row to Miami. They want to get that stench out of the way, and it's only 6 points I have to worry about.
Well, I've been preaching against Miami all season long. They got big problems down here, and I don't think it rectifies over the course of 1 week, just simply because they need the win to go bowling. Some way, somehow they've won 5 football games this year. I don't know how. I'm sure one of them was against the high school. But I'm with you. I sort of think Narduzzi will take care of business here. That's a big, big revenge chip that he's got going there. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Miami home for the holidays this year.
All right, and then we take a look at the Big 12 big matchup between TCU and Iowa State. And, there were a few things that I was, and I'm sure a lot of people are out there wondering, because there's the choke possibility with TCU. And if you look at it, their last 7 wins have been decided by 10 points or less. They're only a 10-point favorite. Iowa State has they're on they're on a pretty bad run. They've only had 1 of their 7 losses this year by more than 7 points. That was the 14-point loss to Oklahoma. So that kind of looks like, hey, this is a really good way to kind of jump on Iowa State. I just had this is more of a gut feeling, especially once again how they were able to pull off the game last week. I just get a feeling that this is going to be that game at home that ends a undefeated season in style. I don't think they're going to be in trouble in the fourth quarter because I'll tell you what, if they are, they might lose this football game. So I think they're going to win this game going away. And by the way, Iowa State 97th in the nation in turnover margin. That's been their big issue because they've been outgaining teams, but they just turn the ball over every week. And okay, maybe if they don't turn the ball over, they could probably upset TCU, but they haven't shown us that they can't stop avoiding the turnovers.
Turnovers have been the bugaboo, no question about that. And you can't turn the ball over if you expect to win football games. On the other side, I think this is a huge, huge weight on the shoulders of TCU to have to win this football game. Iowa State, while they've been disappointing this year, their defense has been rugged and rock solid all year long. They've come in here having held each of their last 3 opponents to season-low yardage marks. If this TCU offense doesn't hit on all cylinders and struggles and doesn't gain 400 yards, and I'll tell you right now, they're not going to put up 400 yards in this Iowa State defense. I think it could be a tough road to hoe for this team here, laying doubles at home. Put me down on Iowa State.
Here's an interesting note. TCU is in first place in the Big 12. Iowa State is in last place in the Big 12. TCU is undefeated. TCU is at home. And TCU is only favored by 10 points. Isn't that strange?
Yes, it does. It tells you a lot in there because there's a combo factor here. Number one, there's a lot of respect for Iowa State. And number two, they're not so in love with TCU. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we went through that. The history. Iowa State does not get blown out, and TCU does not blow out teams.
Right.
All right. And then the other game to mention is also a big one, and that is Kansas State and Kansas. And unfortunately, for Kansas State's sake, because Baylor was not able to finish off Texas today, and they almost did, Kansas State now has to win this game. So Kansas State against Kansas. And we said it last week. They're a Jekyll and Hyde team, Kansas State. But I think last week was a sign that no more Jekyll and Hyde. We know the stakes are, and we got to take care of business. And they did. And I see the same thing happening. Now, Jalen Daniels returned for Kansas, so that was a nice sign for them. But once he got hurt against TCU, they just went downhill. So maybe they get a little of a shot of adrenaline next week in the second week back. But Kansas State has dominated the series. They've won 13 straight. They've covered 10 out of the 13. They've won the last 3 years by 128-34. They're 15-1 against the spread versus teams with a winning percentage of 400 or better in the conference. And you're coming off back-to-back straight-up losses, 1-0 in that trend this year. Yeah, I think they're going to finish off Kansas. And I sort of like the way I kind of feel about TCU. I kind of feel Kansas State is going to be cruising into the fourth quarter, and they won't have to feel like, oh no, all of our Big 12 hopes might be shot here if we lose this football game.
I'm with you. I think what they're benefiting from here is the early success Kansas met with early on in the season, at least from a point spread perspective. Had they not met with that startling beginning to the season here, they'd be laying an extra touchdown in this football game. I'm a big Chris Kleiman fan, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
And
this was the prediction. We both had Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game of the
Exactly.
season. You had Kansas State winning the
Yeah,
Big 12 championship.
and I still do.
I wouldn't jump off that bandwagon either.
Nope. No, I'm not going to. If it's TCU, albeit it doesn't matter, it's still Chris Kleiman to me. And I'm with you. I'm with Kansas State in this football game. I think it's a cheap wholesale price because of Kansas's early success this year.
Pac-12, and things can get really crazy if you look at all the different scenarios that could happen if Oregon does not win. So we start there. Oregon wins. They play USC in the Pac-12 championship game. That's it. Nothing else to talk about. But if Oregon loses, there's scenarios abound. Utah and Washington both have chances to play in the Big 12 in the championship game. UCLA does not. They cannot. So they're playing today against Cal. Game doesn't mean anything. But Oregon State, we talked about this for weeks. Really, we talked about it in the preseason about this game. Oregon State is 8-2 against the spread this year, covered 5 straight, 9-1 straight up, 10-0 against the spread in their last 10 home games versus FBS teams. And their only loss was this year in the last minute to USC. So the Civil War should live up to the mantra. I think it's going to be a great game. I don't trust Bo Nix is anywhere close to 100%, so they're going to have to rely on their defense like last week. Cameron Rising, I haven't seen him play that bad since week 1 against Florida. That was a terrible performance. I don't know what he was doing. It's almost like he was throwing the game away. That's how bad he was. It was like two teams that just didn't play their A game, and so one of them had to win. Whereas if a team had just played a decent game, it would have been a blowout. Team A would have blew out Team B. But both teams played awful last week, and one team had to win, and it was Oregon. So I just like Oregon State in this spot. And I'm sticking with them because I've stick with them. I've been behind their back at home through this entire run, and I'm not going away in this one.
I think this is the spot where upsets occur, Greg. You've got, number one, a very well-coached team. Jonathan Smith is a terrific under-the-radar type head coach. He's masterful in revenge. That's the role that he'll be in this particular game. And it's all on Oregon in this contest here. Win the game, go to the Pac-12 championship. That's all. Well, guess what? It's not going to be that easy. This is an Oregon State football team that is legit this football season. They also play very, very well when they're on a roll. When they're off of a win, they continue to keep winning football games here. I like the upset in the game as well as you. Give me the Beavers in the contest.
Oregon has won 12 out of 14 against Oregon State, but Oregon State has won 2 of the last 3 at home against Oregon. And that's when Oregon State started to play better under Jonathan Smith. Oregon can still get in if Washington State upsets Washington in the Apple Cup. And that is very possible. We know that could happen. That's going to be going on around the same time as the Civil War. Washington's a 2-point favorite. They've won 5 straight. Washington can play USC. And the big one, the big obstacle, is if Cal can beat UCLA today in a game that means nothing to Cal or UCLA. So if Cal upsets UCLA today, then tomorrow Washington would be in a situation where they can play in the Pac-12 championship game by winning and having Oregon lose. So the possibility could be there, and that could be really interesting because you know what? The way these teams are playing towards the end of the season, Washington may deserve a shot of playing in the Pac-12 championship game, and it might up being USC's toughest opponent, especially if Bo Nix is not 100%. So I think this would be a good football game. I love taking Washington State in this situation. They're 5-0 against the spread at home this year. They're 8-2 against the spread overall. They've covered 4 straight games. But there's just something that I just the way Washington is now playing, I just get the feeling that they're going to take care of business and win this game and give themselves an outside chance of playing for the championship game.
A lot of handicapping, Greg, is not only looking at the game itself, but also looking at all the possibilities that surround the game. And you can make the case to handicap Washington State in this game. They're a good team. They're at
Absolutely.
home. They're a dog in a rivalry. All the things about Washington State are there. But that door is open for Washington to sneak into the Pac-12 championship game. And if they sneak into that Pac-12 championship game, I think they can win the
Oh
Pac-12
yeah,
championship game.
sure.
They can. I
Yeah.
mean, they'll be excited. The other team would be kind of like, okay, you're here. We're a better team. But I just can't use Washington State knowing that Washington knows that that door is still open here. I'm going to stay out of the game. I would normally be in Washington State, but I'll pass this week.
I hear you. And Washington's won 10 out of 12 against the Cougars, but the Cougars won last year 40-13.
Ooh.
And then we talk about the two games that are not conference games. I just wanted to mention that because it's going to be one of my top plays. I'm taking BYU, 6 points over Stanford. Why not? Stanford's got a hangover from getting stampeded in the fourth quarter last week in their rivalry game against Cal. They had a huge lead in the fourth quarter and blew it. So they got to be feeling a little bit out, and then they go into the situation with everybody thinking it's possible Shaw might be gone. But BYU is clearly a better team than Stanford, and I only have to give 6 in that spot.
I agree. I think BYU has to be the right side in the football game. And, sometimes it's not just losing games, it's the manner in which you do lose games. And the manner in which Stanford lost that football game makes it very, very difficult to get back up off the mat.
And then the big one, USC and Notre Dame. USC is a 5.5 point favorite against the Irish. Immediately, beginning of the week, the game, and I'm going, and I take USC. It was one of my top plays last week, and I'm like, USC, Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's had a lot of had some bad losses this season, and USC's more talented, and they're more sexy offensively. And then instantly, after thinking that way, it didn't take me long, and I was like, oh, wait a second, no. Notre Dame is the exact type of team that can beat USC. They're a more physical football team. They're well coached. They're hot. They're playing their best football of the season. They're not perfect. I know that. But they've won 5 straight. They've won 8 out of 9. They beat an undefeated Clemson during that stretch, and they handled Clemson easily in that football game. And here it is again. We've talked about this all season, and we talk about it every year. Notre Dame has won 4 straight against USC, and USC is the 5-point favorite. I'm taking Notre Dame in this one.
I agree with you. I understand that there's some question marks about Notre Dame. How do you justify losing to Marshall and Stanford? It happens. It's just the course of why they're not going to be in a big bowl game.
Yeah.
But this will be their bowl game right now, this particular contest, because the pressure is squarely on Southern Cal. Southern Cal's got the Pac-12 championship in their back pocket. Southern Cal would have to win that to possibly make the college football playoff, but that's next week. It's this week here. It's Notre Dame coming in here. Notre Dame's playing some pretty good football right now.
And they just got off, a classic football game last week that had to just drain them physically, psychologically, and they got the championship game next week, and now they got to get ready for Notre Dame this week.
Yep, on top of it, exactly. This is a nice spot for Notre Dame to slip in there, leave with the win, and people at Southern Cal are going to say, what happened? What the heck happened here? But that's exactly what the scenario is here. I'm with you. I like Notre Dame in the game, and I like them in the upset as well.
I think there are a lot of people, and me as a college football enthusiast would really like nothing more than to see a Pac-12, USC, exciting offense, Lincoln Riley, get to the playoffs and give like a Georgia or whoever some good game. I think that's good for the sport. But again, you handicap with your head, not your heart. Keep in mind, USC beat Fresno this year without Haener because Haener got hurt early in the game when it was still a game. They beat Oregon State, and they won that game, as we mentioned, by a minute. And then they beat Washington State, and then they won at UCLA. They lost at Utah. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that it wasn't a really tough schedule. It's a good schedule, but it wasn't like, wow. Boy, were they impressive against some really good football teams. They're susceptible, especially on defense. So, Notre Dame, 2-1 straight up, 3-0 against the spread as dogs this year. Keep that in mind.
Nice.
All right, now let's go to the group of 5. As we mentioned, Tulane is in. They clinched today with their win. So Central Florida taking on my USF Bulls as 20-point favorites. By the way, the rivalry is going to be over because Central Florida is going to the Big 12 next year. Keep in mind the quarterback who missed the second half against Navy last week, Plumlee, may not play this week for Central Florida. If Central Florida beats South Florida, they will play Tulane for the championship. Is this possibly when South Florida gets their win?
No, no.
By the way, did you see the freshman quarterback for South Florida last week?
No.
True freshman. It's like, where's this guy been all year? True freshman comes in, and I don't have his stats here, but he had like over 250 yards in the air, 3 touchdowns. He ran for like 75 yards. His completion percentage was like 80%. And they only lost by like one score against Tulsa. But it's like, man, where is this true freshman quarterback been all season? So, hey, look, if he has a really good game this week and it is a rivalry, then stranger things have happened. But to win in your win is going to be hard to think that Central Florida, a very well coached team by Gus Malzahn, won't be able to figure out how to win it.
Yeah, this is a money line dog I would let go. You might like them to cash a ticket, but I just don't see Central Florida losing this football game. Too much on the line for them in South Florida. Aside from the promise of that unsung new quarterback, they're not a very good football team this year.
Another upset, though, I did take in this conference is Temple. We talked last week about how Temple has played a lot better than people have thought this season. Last week, I think, bad matchup. Cincinnati, really good defense. That's East Carolina, and we talked about it last week. And that's why I stayed away from them. And it happened. They just were flat after the loss the week before to Cincinnati. Completely flat. They got blown out by Houston. What was it, like 45-3? They were playing for nothing. They were already bowl eligible. So now they're playing a Temple team that, as we said last week, they still want to play winning football. And that's why I think this is, why not? I'm going to take a chance on the money line. And keep in mind, too, East Carolina, 3-15 against the spread as a road favorite of more than 6. So if you don't like the money line, I still say you should take the 10.
Well, this is not the best role for East Carolina. Ironically, for whatever the reason may be, 12th game of the season, 12 years, 0-12 against the spread, sort of hit a wall, if you will, in a situation like this. And it's very easy to look past Temple, like some teams have been doing this year, and making that mistake. I'm with you. I got to hold my nose and play the points with Temple.
By the way, Houston can get to the AAC championship game if Central Florida does lose to South Florida. So if there's the upset there, then tomorrow night Houston hosts Tulsa with the chance to play in the AAC championship game. Houston's won 5 of the last 6. Tulsa 1-9 against the spread this year. So either way, I would still take Houston in the game. Tulsa's like Miami. They can't cover anybody.
No, one team's playing pretty good right now. The other hasn't shown up all season long. There's no reason for Tulsa to suddenly make an appearance this week with sort of a lot on the line for Houston. I agree.
Mountain West, Boise. Did you get an opportunity to watch the end of that game against Wyoming last week in the Mountain West? Okay, no. So Wyoming, it looks like the game's over. They got stopped on 4th down, 1:40 left. All Boise has to do is run out the clock. If they do that with timeouts, maybe they could punt it away with 20 seconds left at midfield. I think it was the very first play. The dude fumbles for Boise. The Wyoming defender picks it up and runs 30 yards to the Boise 20-yard line. Now they're set. Now they got the ball at the 20 of Boise. If they can score this touchdown, they kick a field goal to go to overtime. If they get the touchdown, they're going to go to the Mountain West championship game. The very first play, the quarterback throws an interception in the end zone.
Oh, my.
So that was it for Wyoming, and that's it for the Mountain West. We'll see Boise and Fresno State next week. The only thing to keep an eye on, though, is Hawaii has now covered 6 of the last 7. San Jose State, their opponent this week, is 0-5 against the spread in their last 5. So I think that's a wise play. I also like San Diego State against Air Force. They've covered 9 straight against Air Force. Has San Diego State. And actually, is it covered or won? I forget which it was. But anyway, they've dominated Air Force one way or another, and they're the dog in the game. So I like San Diego State in that one. And UNLV. Everybody thought UNLV was done last week when they got upset by Hawaii. Not so fast, because UNLV is number 2 in the APR scoring situation, meaning if there are not enough 6-win bowl eligible teams, the first team with 5 wins to get in will be Rice. The second team, UNLV. But
Yep.
Rice has already got 5 wins. UNLV doesn't. So now UNLV has new life. They're a 12-point favorite at home against Nevada. They've lost 9 straight, and they're just 1-7 against the spread in their last 8. So I think UNLV may not be a bad play either.
Well, they're smart players in those football teams,
Apparently, it's a
and
lot
we've
smarter than I thought. And UNLV, I would have thought they'd be distracted.
no, apparently, obviously, something's going on there. We've seen this before, though, where the APR has gotten teams into a bowl game. So it'll be kind of unique to see and rather nice to see if it happens again this year.
Sun Belt, another team thinking they have a chance, by the way, for possibly that New Year's Bowl Group of 5 game is Coastal Carolina. That's the reason why, partly of the reason why I'm taking them in the money line. They're almost a 5-1 money line play. As much as we both like James Madison and what they've done this year, keep in mind they started 5-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread. Since then, they're 2-3 straight up, 1-4 against the spread. I know Grayson McCall's not playing. That's the whole reason they're a 5-1 money line. But Coastal Carolina also has home field in the championship game to play for. I just think they're disregarding Coastal Carolina way too much for me to not roll the dice a little bit on that 5-1 money line play.
Exactly, and James Madison is not playing for anything other than just to say that
this is their bowl game because they're not going to a bowl.
Say it was their bowl game. Exactly right. This is too good of a football team in Coastal Carolina. And what might be the last game for that head coach there, too. I mean, obviously the season's not over yet. They haven't gone to a championship game, nor they haven't gone to a bowl. But there's still too many good players in this Coastal lineup here. I agree with you. I think it's way too many points to have to lay into the Chanticleers.
And by the way, South Alabama, Troy, because they own the tiebreaker, if they beat Arkansas State, they're going to take on Coastal Carolina in the SBC championship game. I like Troy in the matchup against Arkansas State, 13-point favorite. Obviously, because they need the game. They're 8-2 against the spread this year. They're on an 8-game winning streak, which is the longest winning streak for the program in FBS history. And Arkansas State is playing for nothing. And their only FBS wins this year over Louisiana Monroe and UMass. So I think Troy should win and win easy enough that they don't have to feel pressure late in the game. And if they do that, then South Alabama will be playing for nothing. Actually, I guess if you look at it, they are going to play for something because they play at 12 o'clock before the 3 o'clock Troy game.
Right.
But they should take care of business because Old Dominion has really tanked it late in the season.
I agree. I mean, you get football teams like Old Dominion who were never good to begin with, and they're really going out as flat as pancakes. Only one way to look, and those are the good football teams against the bad teams.
Okay, and in Conference USA, we know it's UTSA in the championship game. And then who are they going to play? It's looking like North Texas, but they have to beat Rice. They're a 14-point favorite at home. We think that they'll probably do that. I mean, North Texas has played really well late in the season, even though they're coming off, a bad loss the last time they played, and that was a couple of weeks ago because they had a bye last week. But if you look at it, they're 4-3 straight up, 6-1 against the spread in their last 7 games. If they win the game, they clinch the championship game. And as I said, Rice, I'm sure they know it, that they could still probably will be at a bowl this year. Even if they lose this football game, it'll be their first bowl since 2014. I'm staying away from the game because it's a lot of points. And Rice is definitely the problem with Rice is they turn the ball over. It's like Iowa State. They actually have had a good season, but they always kill themselves with turnovers.
That's generally what bad teams do. They're trying to prove they're not a bad team to make a bowl game here. So I'm going to stay out of the game and just watch it like you are as well.
And then if North Texas gets upset by Rice, Western Kentucky can get in with a win over FAU. They're a 7-point favorite in that one. Either way, I still like Western Kentucky, even though FAU needs the win. They lost to Middle Tennessee State last week, which would have clinched the bowl berth. So, and Tyson Helton, 15-2, straight up and against the spread as a head coach. When he takes on an opponent off a straight up against the spread loss, and he's also 7-0 against the spread at home in the same, formula. So I'm all over Western Kentucky in that one.
I'd be a little bit reserved there only because you do have that shaky 16 spot in this football game for the home dog in the contest, FAU, who was
Yeah.
playing some pretty decent football early, not so much late. But I'm going to respect that 5-6 home dog to give their best effort.
And how about this? Texas San Antonio, 17-point favorite at home against UTEP. UTEP needs the win for bowl eligibility. For UTSA, they've already clinched home field. And keep this in mind, last year, UTSA, same scenario. They beat UAB, and that clinched the championship game appearance. It also kept them undefeated. But more importantly, hey, we're in the championship game now. The very next week, when it meant nothing, they went on the road against North Texas as a 10-point favorite and lost. So here they are again. They're playing for nothing. This time, at least, they're home. But they're playing for nothing against a team that, and by the way, that North Texas team last year needed the win for bowl eligibility, just like UTEP needs the win for bowl eligibility this season. So, very ironic that they're in the same spot they were last year, UTSA, and they lost the game to the team that needed it more than they did.
Yeah, it's sort of the end to a fiction novel, if you will. But we know
if UTEP can actually win the game and give the story a little bit more meaning.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah,
to round the story out.
Yes.
Yes.
Which I'm going to roll the dice on that they will. Again, we all know how good Texas San Antonio is, and if they had to beat UTEP 50-10, they would. But you never know. It could be one of those kind of deals. And I don't think they're going to play this game. Oh, we have a shot at the New Year's Bowl, because the chances of them getting to the New Year's Bowl game is just it's too far. I don't think they have any, belief that that's actually a possibility. And then finally, the MAC, Ohio got the win on Tuesday. So we're going to see Ohio in the game against Toledo. So we'll talk about that next week. And the only thing I wanted to mention in the MAC is Buffalo needs to win for bowl eligibility. And I like Buffalo in the game against Kent. They're a 3-point home favorite. And I'm going to go for the last time. I've taken them 2 other times. I came close both times. So I'm going after Akron again for the last time to pull off an upset. Maybe this is the one to get done. They're a 3-1 money line at Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois is only 3-8 this year. They're 1-5 straight up and against the spread as a favorite this year. And under Hammock, their head coach, in 4 years, they're 4-9 straight up, 3-10 against the spread as a favorite. So maybe this is the perfect opportunity for Akron to get their first FBS win of the season under their new coach, Moorhead.
Well, if you look at Northern here, the one thing that they have working for them is they figure to win the football game. I don't think the upset's going to likely occur. In the last 17 MAC conference victories they've had, they've gone 16-1 against the spread. I don't see them winning and not covering in this football game. I just Akron's got other visions in mind. I'm going to be with Northern Illinois in the contest.
And by Akron's, by the way, 5-2 against the spread in their last 7. So, they've played better football, which is the reason why I've gambled on them a few times to pull off the upset. They just haven't done it. And the only other game I wanted to mention is Army, because they're playing Navy in a couple of weeks. And as long as they take care of business against UMass on Saturday, then the game against Navy will be for bowl eligibility for Army. So there you go. UMass does not have an FBS win this season.
Surprise.
Don Brown's got his work cut out for him.
Yes, he does.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up. We really don't have too much time for the NFL, so we'll just spend it on talking about the game that I'm going to go with, like my top game, and that is going to be Tampa Bay against your Cleveland Browns. It looks like Deshaun Watson might be coming soon. Could be next week. Who knows? Tampa Bay coming off the win against Seattle might have been their biggest win of the season. They had the bye last week. They were a 3-point favorite in this one. So the way Cleveland played against Miami last week, I'm not seeing it. Not against Tampa Bay. Look, if Tampa Bay can't beat Cleveland the way Cleveland looked last week, and the way Tampa Bay looked pretty good against Seattle, then maybe Tampa Bay is going to be something that we're going to see all season. They're not going to get out of their funk. But I kind of think that maybe they're on the way to getting out of their funk.
I'm going to take a timeout here. It's real dark in here. Can you see me okay? I've only got my light on me.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
I'm fine.
No,
Okay.
no timeout necessary. You're good.
Okay. Okay. My light is working. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll pick this back up here.
Oh
Okay.
sure, go right ahead.
Okay. This is a difficult game here for both teams for me for both reasons. The Browns, if you take a look at them, uh, they're not playing good football here, obviously. Okay. When they're coming off of consecutive away games, they're 1-14 to the spread. They've never been any good when they weren't any good, and they're struggling here right now as well. I don't know if it gets any better in a situation like this. I do know that Tom Brady, Jacoby Brissett is a mismatch, not so much of Brady today, but Jacoby Brissett is purely a backup quarterback, and he hasn't served the Browns well. All he needed to do was hold serve until Deshaun Watson
And
gets
they had a chance a couple of times to do that. Yeah.
absolutely right. And he did not step up in those games. He's an okay quarterback, but he's not a quarterback that's going to either lead you to a winning season or to the promised land. I think I'd go with the better quarterback in this game than Tom Brady.
And again, and I haven't really spent too much time looking into it, but it could be the last game. I mean, we could see Watson's eligible to play next week. So,
well, against Houston, he's going to play. Yes,
yeah,
right.
So we'll see exactly how that how that comes about, but it'll definitely make news, no question about it, all week, and that will be something. All right, last thing is my two upsets this week in the NFL. I'm taking Jacksonville and Green Bay. Either one of those you're going to go with, or stay away from those?
I like Green Bay with you. I think there's an upset in the making here. Philadelphia, we're not seeing the Philadelphia Eagle team right now that we saw that started the season undefeated here. We're seeing a mediocre Philadelphia Eagle football team. Obviously, Green Bay has had their problems here, but you're still talking Aaron Rodgers in an underdog role in a prime time football game, which is where he really excels. That's the upset that I like in those two games. Jacksonville, I'm a little bit concerned about, only because I don't know if this football team yet knows how to win football games. Baltimore is still. They've got this thing about them that everybody has them being the team out of the AFC North and the team that's going to make a lot of noise in the playoffs. I haven't seen it so far. But
and Jackson's banged up. That's the thing. I mean, he was totally hurt last week, which is why they scored 13 points against Carolina.
Yep.
And he's got the hip injury again this week. He doesn't seem like he's that much more healthier. And they've got a bunch of other injuries. So yeah, they're not a very healthy team. And this is a Jacksonville team, by the way, that's won both of their games as home dogs this year.
That's a good point. Real good point. And who wants a large road favorite with a quarterback that's banged up, as you mentioned here? So take the points with Jacksonville. Yes, money line, you're on your own.
And by the way, the Green Bay thing, Green Bay still has a chance if they can kind of get on a end of the season, like winning 5 of the last 6 kind of run. So they are still going to play for the game really hard, like if their season depends on it, because it does. Whereas Philadelphia, we were trailing by 10 points to the Colts last week and almost lost 2 in a row. When we talked about that, you mentioned the history about teams that go undefeated and they lose their first game. And then sure enough, that's what happened. And Philadelphia almost, they weren't into it like they had been psychologically, and they almost let it slip. But I don't know what that says. Does it say, all right, we're back? Or does it say, yeah, now we're kind of in a funk. We're not as hot as we were earlier in the season.
Great stat in this football game for Aaron Rodgers. When he loses as a favorite in a game and he comes back as an underdog the next week, 11 times in his career, he's gone 10-1 straight up end of the spread, 10 wins straight up as an underdog out of those 11 games. Hence, we like Green Bay to win this game, yes.
And again, they're getting 7. Oh, finally, you didn't mention, I didn't ask you to tell me which college upset you like the most. It's South Carolina, Coastal Carolina, Temple, Akron, Auburn, UTEP, or Vanderbilt?
Auburn, Cadillac Williams.
The biggest one.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yes, it is.
10-1. All right. Cash that check.
There we go. Look out.
All right, Mark. We'll now with the holidays, you weren't able to have your show this week, so you'll be back with the boys next week.
Yes,
and it's sort of like a way to kind of recharge the batteries, because there's going to be a lot of really cool football stuff to talk about, even starting next week, because you got the championship weekend next weekend in college football. Then you get the whole playoffs set up and the bowl games, and you're going to be hard at work setting up the bowl report. and then of course the stretch run for the NFL. So it should be a lot of fun.
I'm really looking forward to it, Greg. Next week, I love those college football conference championship games.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good angles in there, and we'll talk about those next week.
Thanks, Mark.
Hey, Greg, have a great week. Enjoy the games. Be well.